Are your settlements as wondrous and captivating as your dungeons? No? Well, then stick around as we delve into the guide for world building settlements in your Dungeons and Dragons games. Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Crit Academy. I am your host, Justin.
I'm your co-host, Ian.
And I'm your co-host, Matthew.
Yes, we have a special guest filling in for Brandon. Matthew has been on the show before. Thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
My pleasure.
It's been a long while.
Yeah, this is just so surreal to be back in here, totally renovated.
It's very exciting. A lot of good work's done. So thank you for joining us today, where we hope to inspire you with creative content that you can bring with you on your next adventure. So I have to admit, I'm really excited for this. We're trying a little bit of a slightly new format. We're going to be more open to a wide discussion format instead of the usual, and we'll see how it goes. So the D&D world is wide and wondrous. We all can agree, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's filled with monsters and magic. However, most people live in relatively safe communities, and even bold adventurers need safe havens from saving the world and liches and every other big baddie you can imagine. These areas are points of light in the dark world, and they share some common traits. When you think about it, the civilized areas of your world are the place that the characters are going to spend the most time in, right?
Most of their downtime at the very least.
Yes, and there's a lot of opportunity there, right?
Their civilized sanctuary.
Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned Sanctuary. I've been playing Diablo Immortal, and on Sanctuary, there's you got these little towns and stuff where outside the towns, everything is destruction. So you got to have these nice things. So
and everything out there wants to kill you.
yes, and if it doesn't want to kill you, no, they only want to kill you. So what that means is when it comes to building settlements, we want to ensure that we build fun and exciting and memorable locations. So for us, we have a laid out plan of questions you can ask yourself while world building to really help bring those places to life, even if they're going to be temporary stop signs on the adventurer's path to bigger and more extravagant places, right?
Now, the first question we'll need to ask about each settlement, town, whatever, is what purpose does the location serve?
What does that mean to you, Matthew?
There could be a lot of things, like, for example, a mining town or a farming town.
Ooh,
or
that's good.
And to be more diverse with the farming or the mining, what sort of resource are people farming or mining? Is it gold or is it silver? Is the farmer's specialty a type of fruit or wheat? Or
I love that.
Also, could be a trade route or a frontier fort, or maybe in some cases the capital.
yeah,
Those are really good points. So when you're designing a city or a settlement, whether it's a farmhouse or it's a capital city, deciding on what its purpose is before will be one of the first questions you want to ask yourself, because it's going to help you get the lay of the land, right? What features you're going to include. And I actually like what Matt said here about understanding what the purpose of it is because when you're fleshing it out, you have to constantly ask yourself, okay, it's a mining town. What are they mining? How are they getting it out of the town? Who's buying it? Who's utilizing it? Who's coming to get it?
who's the town's client?
Oh, that's really good too. I like that.
Who's the town leader?
Yeah.
Although I guess it touches on the later question.
Yep, that's a little bit, but that's still a good thing to consider. And when it comes to, answering that question, it has a wide variety of answers, but the goal is to help you diversify, because if you say I'm building a mining town and now you're building another town, you're going to think, well, I already built a mining town, better not build a mining town, right? So it's going to drive diversity in your adventures and campaigns, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the most unique settlement you guys have ever had your characters venture into?
It's been a bit too long. I think in our Planeshifters campaign, I think it would be the what was it? embassy of the Celestia Conclave.
Ah, yes.
You know, there's a mixture of civilization and nature. It was something that I wasn't expecting. You know, the vines and the branches integrating with the Ravnican buildings and all that.
Yes.
Although I was kind of although to be honest, I was kind of thinking for the Selesnya Conclave being as advanced as they are for
Mhm.
Ravnica, I was thinking somewhere along the lines of something that was shown in Netflix's Voltron. You know, the people who live in the forest
Mhm.
and how
It's a
they
good show. If you haven't seen it, it's awesome.
yeah, and how they spoke with nature to shape it where they would coexist, where the people and nature would coexist together. That would have been something interesting for the Selesnya Conclave.
See, now that's really cool and memorable. As he discusses that, you instantly get a sense of wonder where you have a mix of nature and urban design, which isn't something that you run into very often. What about you, Ian?
I remember one game of Pathfinder, we were in a small settlement, which kind of started off as a fort. And the idea was it was on the edge of the frontier. And the idea was more people would settle it as time went by. But it was so small it didn't have a name until just to screw around with the rest of the party, we got attacked by mercenaries, and my character very loudly referred to it as the town of Dickwood.
Ah, there you go.
And the mercenaries escaped. So I'm like, oh, guess what? People are going to call this place now.
Oh.
And if I may, there's actually one other great example, but it's not something that my characters experience. It's something that I've witnessed in the second campaign of
Critical Role.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge fan of Critical Role. You know, it's what got me into D&D in the first place, which is why I hold it in such a high regard in such a matter.
Yeah, and
that's
as a
fair.
DM, it's very hard to live up to that standard.
Yes.
But I try each and every day and fail each and every day.
No, actually, when we did Storm King's Thunder, you did a pretty good impression of an NPC that Matt Mercer did when we went to that northern town.
I remember it. The Victor.
Yeah,
It was Victor. Yeah.
Victor the black powder merchant.
Oh.
That was a great impression.
Yes. Well, thank you.
So anyway, so to go back to the example, I was thinking of campaign 2. Town of I think halflings or gnomes called Hupperduke. It is that it says yeah. I kind of figured that would make you laugh.
Hupperduke.
So what the purpose of the town or the city per se is that it is I believe it's like the manufacturing and research and development city for the Dwendalian Empire's weapons of war. You know, like siege weapons, cannons, firearms, and whatnot. There was Matt Mercer narrated that there was mention of some blast craters on some open fields of the city that was cordoned off from everyone. You get the sense that was like the experimental sites and whatnot. Sorry to go off on
it's a good tangent. It's exactly point of this, right?
Yep.
So that actually leads into as a good segue into our next question you want to ask yourself is, how big is it going to be, right? I mean, you're like, I want a vast, giant farm. Well, if you're going to build this just ginormous 10,000 person farm, you're probably farming people.
Pretty much.
You know what I mean? So.
Although to be fair, some plantations did get pretty big too, and were kind of small industrialized towns in themselves. So.
Oh yeah.
But that definitely influences the type of processes you're going to have, right?
Oh yeah.
So we keep going back. We talked about mining, so I want to kind of keep going back to that.
Right, and that's worth mentioning too. That depending how big the town or settlement is, can definitely influence what supplies might be available to the players as well too.
Like, ooh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because a large town is more likely just to have more resources that players can draw from, and therefore more likely to have, like, let's say, items or those who can craft them.
That's a really good point, and that's something that I think 5th edition could use a little more work on describing, because we know that it's not really high fantasy. It's kind of somewhere, I would say it's a low fantasy setting. Not as bad as like Lord of the Rings, but it's very up to the DM how much they implement. But when designing your city, You can say, okay, this is a city like Waterdeep. It's huge. It's massive. There's going to be a few people selling a few magical artifacts, a few different, maybe not artifacts. I didn't mean artifact as the quality, but you know what I'm going there. So that makes a good point because you're not going to walk into a little hovel like the Shire and be like, all right, where's me a magic ring? Oh, bad example. Usually in a Shire, you're not going to find a magical item. In that case, there was one, but that's pure
That's like a diamond in a rough.
Right.
Nothing about Candlekeep.
Candlekeep's a good example.
Yep.
Which we did not explore in our Avernus campaign. It was just a stopping point for us.
Yep. And actually, there's a book out there that allows you to really expand upon that, the Candlekeep Mysteries.
Yeah.
Which is basically is just one massive library. So.
Yep. So you pick up a book and, here's a quest. It's actually kind of cool. But anyway, so how big of it? So going back to the mine, if you got a small mining town of, 100 people, that's going to have a different structure than a mining town of 1,000 people. Oh, yeah. You're going to have more resources. They're going to be mining. They're going to be putting out more output. They're going to have more clients, more people coming in. And the structure is going to be different. I imagine in a mining town of 100 people, you have wheelbarrows being pushed around. Yeah. And with 1,000 people, complex cart pathways in and out of mines that are supported just like a whole new structure. And the process is just more refined.
Yeah. More industrialized.
Yes. And so that's kind of how that's how the size of your town can really impact the way you're building around it, even if it's just a fishery, right? If you've got a small little port town, you're going to have people going out on their little tiny boats and throwing their nets overboard, casting them and pulling them up, and that's probably about it. But if you go into a massive harbor that's got 1,000 people in it, you're probably going to have people who have big giant boats that got 20 people on it that are trolling with a big giant net behind it, and it takes more people to do the work. You're going to have probably potentially they don't have canneries in D&D, do they?
Why not?
I don't know. I guess they had it in Mistborn, and that was a fantasy setting. But so the size and how big it is can really play a big factor. Matt, what's the next question you think we should? Wait, everyone got good points there? We good? Okay.
So the next question is, who lives there? And I think that there's a great example for this. Back in our Storm King's Thunder campaign, you had my character and Ian's character travel to a small blacksmith village that is run by orcs.
Yep.
And their specialty, make weapons and armor. And what better way to do that than a race that loves to fight than orcs? They're great. They would be great at forging in terms of metal for weapons and armor. That's a great example. But another common example would be like a hill dwarf city that also is good at forging weapons and armor. They would be on the surface and whatnot.
And you make a really good point there, right? Because the types of way they make their weapons are going to differ, right?
Or let's say, like, depending on who if it's a town run by merfolk that actually like people.
That's really good, Ezio's girls.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's Brandon.
One shot.
Anyways, what were you going to say, Ian?
In a mining town, as we kind of established, I can picture dwarves living there, but I can also picture maybe if it's like big enough, like, okay, here's how it actually works out. Yeah, we go to the town itself, humans live there, but we actually go inside the mines below ground, that's where the dwarves live.
Ooh, I like that. I really like that. That's kind of a symbiotic relationship, right?
I mean, hey, why do you guys live down there? How can you live in a place with no ceiling? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, that would be a great example for 𝙀𝙭𝙥𝙧𝙧𝙖𝙧𝙀. No ceilings for their houses.
Oh, that's a really good example.
Yeah, because they can just fly up and not just take the door.
Yeah, and so those types of things are going to influence the way the city is designed, right? I want to continue off the 𝙀𝙭𝙥𝙧𝙧𝙀 thing because I think that's really awesome. If you have an 𝙀𝙭𝙥𝙧𝙧 village, what are you going to do with that? For first thing that comes to my mind, if you have a group of 𝙀𝙭𝙥𝙧, now I do realize that they are from the aren't they from the elemental airplane?
I don't remember.
But
trees, cliff sides, there's options.
All that stuff. And you can tie that into what they do, which we talked on previously. Instead of a mining village, maybe they're messengers.
Yeah.
And so their entire village,
they're the city's messengers.
Yes. And the entire village or city is on the edge of a valley, and they got all these little like holes that they just fly into, and each hole is information going to a different location.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, they become mailmen. They're literally the fantasy mailmen. Man, that's a really good one, because you also want to think about the population distribution too, right? Is it mostly humans? Is it all one race? Do they deliver babies? I would imagine there'd be stork Aarakocras, right? Just carrying little packages on the end of their beaks. All right, Ian, what's our next question here?
Well, a settlement, who governs it? Who's in charge? Who holds the power? Like, you may or may not have empires, large kingdoms, but you also may have city-states too. Or sometimes the cities or towns just like are often their own autonomous region that might be part of a kingdom, but they more or less keep to themselves, like the Two Rivers, for example.
Yep, Two Rivers is a good example.
Like, they're technically part of a kingdom, but everybody kind of forgot about them, so they kind of ran themselves.
And that's hilarious.
Yep.
That's a really good example of size making a difference, right?
I thought it was hilarious too, when the Two Rivers spoke like, wait, we're part of a kingdom? Since when?
Since forever.
I think I know a good example to establish this. Like, if you're doing the Forgotten Realms as your campaign setting, and you want to create a homebrew world that's not on the map, or a homebrew settlement that's not on the map, you can create a homebrew member of the Lord's Alliance who governs that settlement.
Ooh, I like that. Or a Zentarum one who governs it and rules with an iron fist. There's plenty of background.
The shadows too.
Yes, I love it. It's good stuff. So the power structure is important because it's going to affect directly how the players are addressed during their adventures, specifically their consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
So if a lord, let's go back to the Zentarum we were just talking about, if that person's got some stuff going on and the adventurers come in and diddly it up, they're going to now have some issues. And I can see him totally coming in, grabbing the players, like, look, the characters are like, you guys are, I don't want you here. You need to leave. You're going to cause trouble. And start making look like any problems that arise are their fault, just to keep them away from what else might be going on.
Yeah.
And maybe they just bribe them to leave. Like, look, adventurers are nothing but trouble. I need you to leave. Let alone that inside the Zentarum screaming, you destroyed half my team. But he ain't going to outright say that, right?
Yeah.
And that power structure is going to affect how the wealth is spent too, right?
Yeah.
That's a big one. If you got something like the Two Rivers from the what is the book series I'm reading right now?
Wheel of Time?
Wheel of Time, thank you. I'm on book 11 and I couldn't remember the name. Anyways.
It's a large book series from what I'm told.
14, I think. In the Wheel of Time, I would say that the Two Rivers, everyone is about helping each other.
Yep. 15 becomes a prequel book.
There's a prequel?
Yeah. There's only one book, though, unfortunately.
Oh, the Dragon Reborn?
No, it follows Moraine.
Oh.
Yeah, when her and man met each other for the first time.
Okay, that's a little more interesting. Anyway, so when you're deciding on the government and who holds power, that can affect the plots, the hooks, the interactions. I really think that when you got a good hierarchy, their kind of persona reflects down on the people.
Yep.
So if you have somebody that particularly has a disdain for dwarves, that disdain will probably follow through to all of their servants or their followers.
Yeah.
And so when the player comes in, that's a dwarf, everyone hates them, and they find out it's because the leader of this town is a elf.
Yep.
He just got some beef,
Yeah.
All right.
I'm not thinking about, like, in the Discworld series, one of the main cities, Ankh-Morpork, is governed by a partition. And the City Watch, which kind of ties into the defenses question we have coming up here, it's only 4 people. And the reason why the police force is so small is because crime used to be a problem in the city, to the point where the parties are like, well, if it's that bad, we might as well legitimize it. So they made a thieves guild.
We can't stop the crime, so let's just allow it but control it and tax it.
Exactly.
Tax it, yes.
And you can't commit crimes without a permit.
So now you gotta pay for a permit. Wait. You can't steal from me. Where's your permit?
Yes. And then without actually pre-scheduling the crimes too.
Oh my goodness.
What's worse than being rule sharked is being rule sharked by an NPC.
Oh my goodness. Wait. Which guild are you with?
And you practice crime without a permit. Well, let's just say large men with sticks with nails in them since I show up to your
Just-
doorstep. So they're actually a more effective police force than the actual police force.
Oh my goodness!
Oh.
Because now you're taking away their business. And if
Yeah.
there's one thing we can count on, any sort of corporation is screwing over the little people,
Wow.
even if they are entrepreneurs
Yep.
of the illegal variety.
Oh, you're gonna steal my painting? Give me a moment so I can share it. Go ahead.
There. I'll look it this way. You take the painting that way. All right. So there's a lot that goes into deciding on the culture, and Ian already mentioned it. The next question you want to ask yourself when developing a good settlement, whether it's a city or a town, is what are its defensive? This is a big one because I feel like people forget about this, and because of it, the adventurers get away with doing stupid stuff that they should not be getting away with. If there was any sort of people that are designed to enforce the laws, so
Yeah,
whether
and it can vary depending on how big the settlement is.
Mhm.
Yep. I think that militias are pretty common for the smaller ones where it's just the farmer and his pickaxe and maybe one retired adventurer. Soldiers, professional, might be hired and do double duties in the settlement. So maybe they're a soldier one day and the next day they're an extra farmhand during crop times.
Why could he has walking statues? Yep.
I didn't know that. That was in the Dragon Heist book, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I do remember that.
Something that we probably never got to when we did that.
Yeah, we didn't run that very long because Brandon hated us and didn't want to finish running.
I think just some scheduling issues with the new job too. So
yeah, I'm still gonna blame that on him. That's what I do. So, anyways, the reason why this matters is because a good example with Waterdeep, as Etsy's girl is talking about, or Brandon's talking about, is if the player characters do some sketchy stuff. I got arrested and my character's life threatened for drawing a weapon. I drew a weapon and they were about ready to stomp my face in.
The city guard, yes.
The city guard, like their job is to beat my face in if I draw a weapon for no reason. And that's one of the laws in Waterdeep. So the amount of power that it takes to enforce that is reinforced by what the guards may not be necessarily that strong, but the magistrate who runs everything have all kinds of power.
Or maybe the guards individually aren't very strong, but there's lots of them.
Yes. I mean, 1,000 guards can take down especially in 5e's mechanics-wise, right?
Yep.
With the bounded accuracy. But even beyond that, 1,000 guards, adventurers, if they get the jump on them, they might be okay with a fireball. But eventually that wizard going to run out of spells. You just keep throwing soldiers at them and eventually succeed. So
I knew their weakness. All the rebels had a priest that killed him. So I just sent in waves and waves of soldiers, so they all died and they all shut down.
one of my favorite defenses is the more classic, based off the West world, right, where you got like one chief or one sheriff, and he's got a deputy and maybe a couple grunts, but the town is so small that that's all that they can afford to pay.
Yeah.
But the person that they hire,
or all they need.
I was gonna say, because the person that they hire is really, really good. And that can make all the difference. Walking Tall is one of my favorite rock movies, and he comes in, this one guy cleans out all the corruption because he's just awesome.
The actual police officer that the movie's based off of was actually even more awesome.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that was based off anything.
Let's just say the mafia killed his family, and then he had nothing to lose at that point, so he kind of went.
Oh, that's totally the same story as the Punisher, isn't it?
Yep.
Man, that's a good story. We should do that. But anyway, so when you're deciding on the defenses, you use that to, I don't want to say control your characters, but make sure they have to deal with consequences of their thievery, weapon brandishing. If you follow the laws of the land, which is a previous episode we touched on, you should totally check that out. It touches on all the different varieties of laws that exist. Like brandishing a weapon without reason is a huge fine. How many times your character's always like, I'm gonna attack that guy, I'm gonna draw my blood, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna give him a good poking,
The chaotic evil ones.
Yeah, like there should just be a guy following around passing out fines.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just like, oh hey Billy, good to see you. Here's another ticket. We don't do that because honestly, in some cases, that's not as much fun. But as soon as you do that a couple times, and they ain't got no money for magic items, they're gonna.
Or in some cases, the players aren't at the town's defenses.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Oh, that's a great
So-
way.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. There was one time, I think I was playing 4th edition, where the group, I played them up to like level 6 or 7, not very high, but and we wanted to retire them. So they became the nobles of that town
Oh.
and the guardians. They weren't necessarily, there was militia people that worked under them,
Yeah.
but they were essentially the nobles of that area. And their new players were getting quests from their old characters, which was awesome because the players had the knowledge of what they did. So one of the villains of the previous hero showed up again. It's one of those, I've destroyed my villain. Oh, he survived with scorched body and missing arms and legs, and now he's got this big robotic construct suit, and he's learned magic and can, push people off edges with magical power and choke them from a distance.
Okay, Darth Vader.
Sound familiar? Yes. It was totally that. But he came back, and so their new characters had to deal with a villain of their old characters, which was just so much fun. And
That's
so
amazing.
when you're designing your defenses, think about those sorts of things, especially if you just want to say, hey, I'm just developing this town. I think your barbarian would really fit in here as like the chief. What do you think? Always do it with permission. Don't be tossing people's characters into your campaign stuff without talking to them first.
And that goes both ways.
Yeah, because they'll hate it. So I think when it comes to the defenses, you want to think more than just the people too, right? We were talking about the people, but what types of walls do they have? What kinds of weapons are they carrying? Can they afford a few trebuchets, or can they do they have sentry towers? Do they have patrols that go through the local areas? What are some other defenses before we move on? That's not people related, because we kind of spent a long time on that.
Yeah, I just flashed back to an old episode of Batman the Animated Series where like Joker got an inheritance.
From who?
An old mob boss. But there was one point where when Joker was panicking, he's like, "Okay, I may be crazy enough to go up against the Batman, but the IRS? No, thank you."
I remember seeing that clip.
Excuse me. So that's
So
really
administration can be a defense too in some
paperwork. Nobody
cases.
wants that stuff. All right. So the next question we're going to want to ask ourselves as we're developing out our fantastic settlement is, where do characters go to find what they need? So this is big because depending on the size of the area, which we've already talked about,
Yeah.
they're going to need to go to different locations for resources.
Mhm.
A really good example for this is medicine. In a small town, the healer, the leader, the local town magistrate might all be the same person,
Yep.
While in a bigger town they might be different people. And so what are some things that the characters would need that you would want to flesh out with this question? What are the characters, where do they go to find what they need? What are some things they're going to need?
Well, depending on what they need, but I could also picture some sort of religious attachment being present even in a small city.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
Yeah, that's great for paladins and clerics of the party and whatnot. But
That's a good one. What else you got?
let's see. I think basic provisions might be a great
Oh,
example
yeah,
for possibly even the smallest settlement that
Mhm.
can be found.
Like things for toolkits and stuff, whether it's a herbalism kit or
Yeah.
the mage. Oh, so this is something we don't touch on very often. Wizards have spell components, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes there's places that should open up to have those. At what level do you have those? For me, a smaller midtown probably wouldn't have it.
Yep.
But you can expect to find like an arcane shop in a bigger town.
Depends on the component, but yeah.
What's that?
Depends on the components.
Well,
of course,
right.
but yeah.
Like diamonds aren't going to last very long. So
Speaking of diamonds, a great example for a wizard to get a spell component for a spell like chromatic orb.
Mhm.
What's the best settlement to get the component? A diamond mining town.
run by some dwarves that you've already designed because you answered that question in the previous example. Which is a good example. So those are the things you want to think of. Other things are like maintenance of equipment, right? Specialized equipment. Cold weather gear is a big one, right?
Yeah.
You're not expected to find cold weather gear in most villages. You're certainly going to find one at the bottom of a mountain,
Yeah.
or in a frozen, desolate land. Of course, if you get there and it's already frozen.
Or a town in
How
the
did you
tundra north.
Yeah.
Yep.
So those are things that you want to really consider when you're doing your what do they need? Whether it's a blacksmith, armorsmith, weaponsmith, are they all one or is it different people? Services too, right?
Mhm.
They're going to need an inn. So
Yeah.
you're going to need an inn. What service is that inn? Does that inn offer like messages to different to send ahead of you, right? So hey, we got carrion pigeons or some Aarakocrans that will deliver, messages to the next town before you get there,
Yep.
so you can alert people if you're coming, right?
And is there a guild hall there if you
Ooh, that's a good
implement
one.
guilds for a settlement?
That's a good one. Because that might be how they do all their
Because
questing too,
what's
right?
at a guild hall? Bounties.
Money, right?
And paperwork.
Because everyone loves paperwork.
Actually, like how in Goblin Slayer, the manga,
Oh,
like the application to become a guild member at the guild hall there was an actual 5th edition D&D character sheet.
That's awesome. I didn't notice that. Wow.
That's the manga, not the anime.
Oh. Yeah,
oh.
okay. I wonder why they can get away with that, or does it just look very similar?
I mean,
No, it's straight up the 5th edition character sheet.
All right, Matt. What is our next question?
What temples or other organizations are there?
Yeah, we did just kind of talk about temples and guilds and stuff, but it goes beyond that, right?
Yep.
You mentioned thieves' guilds. Secret societies is always a must in a moderately sized town.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
a great example for this is like the Forgotten Realms 4 organizations. 3 of them are roughly good, and the other one's just criminal. You have the Zentarum, the criminal one, and then you have the other 3.
Oh, it's more than 3.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I think we've only encountered 4, I think, total.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's the Zentarum,
Lord Alliance, the Harpers, the Emerald Enclave, the Iron Gauntlets.
Order of the Gauntlet.
Order of the Gauntlet.
Yep.
There's another one too, I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they all are, but there's lots.
Yeah.
And if you're playing in Forgotten Realms, or even if you're not, you can still use those and say, okay, this location might have a access point for the Harpers. You want to do that sort of stuff that makes sense for that setting, but also a great way to tie your characters and their needs into the campaign, right?
Yep.
Yep. I think that you can expand upon this even more too, by having a kind of an influence gauge, right? So this town has this secret society, and this secret society has influences in these other locations. And what the player characters do could draw attention of those societies,
Yeah.
depending on the influence that place has. If you go to one where there's a small influence, maybe the other secret societies won't do anything, but they might hear word of it.
Yeah.
And then they do something small in another town. And then that just slowly builds up the reputation until the Zentarum finally are like, we got to do something about these guys. They're messing up our flow of our business, you guys. So that's something that really comes out of asking yourself, what kind of organizations. And I do think that is good, because that's a good way to kind of get the political authority of all the stuff you've built in the world kind of connected together, which goes back to what you were saying about the 2 rivers, right?
Yep.
That has a political influence in me that's not an Andor coming to it.
Yeah.
But everyone there is like, it's not affecting my life. I had no idea we were part of Andor.
Yeah. Or back at the capital. Oh yeah, we forgot they existed.
Like, good. We need expert longbowmen. Grab them. They're just from the 2 rivers.
Good. We're gonna collect taxes. Why?
Because we own you. Nobody's been here for 3 generations. Where were you when we were attacked? That's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
All right. And the last question that you want to ask yourself when trying to build a wondrous and exciting settlement is, what fantastic elements distinguish it from the ordinary?
Mm.
Now, in a world of D&D, most settlements have certain patterns above.
Legends or historical influence.
But there's going to be some that are just more. And I think that's really important. If you don't have these in your campaigns, you're missing out, because it is a perfect way to feed your little birdie and players a little bits and nuggets of lore about your world.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's as simple as a statue in the center of that town,
of
a hero of that town. I think I don't know who I was running it with, but I ran an adventure where they were in a port town, and in the center of the port town is a guy riding a whale.
Yep.
Right? And so when I describe that, what do you think is the first thing people ask?
Why is he riding a whale?
Yeah, do I know what it is, or who is that, right? because I specifically described. Well, now they're going to want to know. Well, that's the guy that founded the village. Why is he riding on a whale? Because that's how he got around. How did he get around? They say he could talk to animals.
He's a druid.
What's that sound like to you?
A druid.
Yeah.
Yep.
The town was founded by a druid. So he was basically Aquaman, right? That's all he was, but he was a little bit stronger than your average, basically a level like 2 or 3 character. But in that town, that's a big deal. It made him super strong, and he became this legend. Now, the player characters don't know how strong he is. They just know the legend of this guy that founded a town who rode a whale. You know, he rode a whale around.
They don't know the full story.
No, and you don't have to explain it to him either. Give him a dice roll. Hey, here's your history check. Here's what you know. Or just talking to the NPCs should be revealing that stuff.
Natural 20. I know everything.
Well,
Good point.
I want to touch on that really quick. So that's a good point. So natural 20s, they're auto successes in attacks.
That's it.
But doesn't mean they reveal everything.
Yeah.
And because I'm reading Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, the one thing I have learned that the information passed from one person to a next changes. So even if you get fed a lot of information, how reliable is it? But when you're developing your locations, this is certainly something you want to take into consideration.
Mhm.
You want to build the defenses, build the commerce, structure the city in a way that makes sense for the theme that you're going with. And that theme defines itself as you answer these questions. For me, you should always have at least one fantastical area that the players get to visit.
One of my personal favorite examples is in the book The Drawing on the Dark. Most of the book is set on a brewery in Vienna. And it turned out in this brewery, there was a hidden lower level, which brewed a beer called the Dark, which is a 500-year process.
Oh, geez.
And
That makes it pricey.
Well, actually, no, because that beer, they give to the Fisher King every 500 years to help maintain his health and immortality.
Huh. That's a cool story, bro.
It's a good book.
That is. So when it comes into one of my favorite, I think when you're into the fantastic elements, you can start small.
Yep.
Coming across the first town that has a teleportation circle in the church or the temple would be to me, that's a fantastic element when you're low level.
Yeah.
But then you get to Waterdeep and there's like 10 of them to all different locations in the world.
Yeah.
You know, so what can be fantastical may not necessarily have to be fantastical on the grand scheme of the content of the world. Yeah. Though floating island battles are pretty cool. Toss those in there occasionally, but they don't have to be as grand as that to have a fantastical element.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else you guys got to talk about world building settlements here that we might have missed or you'd like to elaborate on?
Well, considering it's 7:50, probably not.
Well, we also started 15 minutes late.
True. But
yeah, that's fair. I think one other aspect of it is like say for example, a long time ago there was a major battle on the outskirts
far away.
No, there was a major battle on the outskirts of this large city that was once a small town. Now it gained its significance because it became a fortress and then a city and then whatnot.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's pretty cool. And that's a good point. You know, the evolution of towns is something you can actually show through your players.
Yeah, through the traverse of time and such.
That's very cool. I like that very much. All right, that's really all I have for this. When it comes to world building, it's hard, it's tough, it's a lot of work.
Start small, build out.
Yeah, yes, that is the best advice. Start on one little town, and then work your way out from there, because trying to build a whole world all at once is a huge task. Plus, if you do that, you'll end up moving things around anyway. So,
yep.
Especially if you let your player characters actually influence everything. So, all right, I think that'll do it for our main topic today, world building settlements. Before we move on to our unearthed tips and tricks, I'd like to take a minute to talk about Scene Grinder. I know you guys probably have already watched last week's episode where we had them on, but if you don't know, Scene Grinder is a very cool virtual tabletop management system, all kind of rolled into one.
Browser-based.
And it's browser-based. Now, I know you just backed this, so you want to tell us really about what brought you into it and what really stood out?
I mean, basically, I at home use Foundry VTT, which does the job just fine. But I also wanted something a little bit later that I can just use anywhere too, and that's a draw for me because using a browser-based virtual tabletop anywhere I go is
very convenient,
very handy.
And it helps a lot that it's 3D.
Yep.
Which is one of the first ones I've seen that's like, and that really stands out. Whether it's you're playing D&D or Pathfinder or Starfinder, they've got assets and stuff going in for that. Their Kickstarter is already way funded. I think their goal was like 10,000. I think they're well over 30 now. So it is a wonderful product. It really is something different that I haven't seen before. Being able to either look at it from a flat top-down view or a full 3D, and the fact that the player characters can run in and you can program NPCs for them to talk to and buy and sell and trade when you're not there is just super awesome and convenient to me. And I don't think I've seen anything like that yet.
Yep.
So I highly recommend checking out Scene Grinder, the virtual tabletop on Kickstarter.
And actually, because it's browser-based, your players can log on any time and you don't have to yourself.
Yep. It does a pretty good job of handling, like, whoa, what if they do this? Well, then it stops them, and they have to wait until you respond. I just imagine that text message. Ian's trying to steal some shit.
Again.
What do you want to do? Stab. He dodges. Fireball. He's Ash. I'll wait for that text. Anyways, I'm really excited for this. I think we had the guys on. They were a lot of fun. So check it out over at rebrand.ly/scenegrinder.